Welcome to our podcast on essential idiomatic expressions to enrich your conversational English. I'm Sarah, and today we're diving into the colorful world of English idioms.
And I'm Mike, joining Sarah on this linguistic journey. We're excited to help you sound more natural and fluent in your English conversations.
Absolutely, Mike. Let's start by explaining what idioms are. They're phrases whose meanings can't be deduced from their individual words. For example, when we say it's raining cats and dogs, we don't mean actual pets are falling from the sky.
That's right, Sarah. It's just a vivid way to say it's raining heavily. Now, shall we break the ice and introduce some essential idioms?
Great idea. Let's start with break the ice itself. It means to initiate a conversation or overcome initial awkwardness. For instance, at the party, John broke the ice with a funny joke.
That's a useful one. Here's another, a piece of cake. It means something is very easy to do. You might hear someone say, that math test was a piece of cake.
Speaking of which, here's an idiom that's particularly handy. Kill two birds with one stone. It means to achieve two goals with a single action.
Exactly. Like how learning these idioms helps you improve both your vocabulary and your cultural understanding of English. That's killing two birds with one stone.
Well put, Mike. Now here's a sweet one. The apple of my eye. It refers to someone's favorite person or thing. Parents often use this to describe their children.
That's lovely. And on the flip side, we have, it's not my cup of tea, which means something isn't to one's liking or preference. For example, sci-fi movies aren't really my cup of tea.
These idioms are fantastic for making your English more colorful. But remember, context is key when using them.
Absolutely, Sarah. It's important to understand not just the meaning, but when and how to use these expressions naturally in conversation.
That's right. And speaking of natural conversation, using these idioms can really help you sound more fluent and native, like in your English.
Definitely. It's like adding spice to your language. But as with spices, you don't want to overdo it. Use them sparingly for the best effect.
Great point, Mike. Now let's think about how our listeners can practice these. Any suggestions?
Well, one way could be to try incorporating one new idiom into their conversations each day. It's a great way to get comfortable using them.
That's an excellent suggestion, Mike. And speaking of practice, let's see how these idioms fit into everyday conversations. For instance, I was nervous at the party until John came and broke the ice with a funny joke.
Great example, Sarah. Here's another. Learning these expressions is a piece of cake if you practice regularly. It's a nice way to encourage our listeners, don't you think?
Absolutely. And here's one that applies directly to our podcast. By taking this English podcast, you're killing two birds with one stone, improving your vocabulary and pronunciation.
That's so true. Now here's a heartwarming one. My granddaughter is the apple of my eye. I love spending time with her. It's a sweet way to express affection, isn't it?
It certainly is. And for contrast, how about this one? I tried skateboarding, but it's not my cup of tea. I prefer cycling. It's a polite way to express dislike or preference.
These examples really bring the idioms to life, don't they? It's one thing to learn the meaning, but seeing them in context makes a world of difference.
Absolutely, Mike. And remember, listeners, using idioms naturally takes practice. Don't worry if they feel awkward at first. With time, they'll become second nature.
That's right. It's all about persistence and regular practice. The more you use them, the more comfortable you'll become.
Well said. Now, before we wrap up this section, do you have any final tips for our listeners on using idioms effectively?
I'd say start small. Choose one or two idioms that resonate with you and try to use them in your conversations this week. Pay attention to how native speakers use them too.
Great advice. And don't be afraid to ask for clarification if you hear an idiom you're not familiar with. Native speakers are usually happy to explain.
Absolutely. Now, shall we move on to strategies for maintaining fluid conversations in English?
That's a great idea, Mike. After all, knowing idioms is just one part of sounding natural in English. Let's explore how to keep conversations flowing smoothly.
Excellent. So listeners, stay tuned as we dive into some practical tips for maintaining fluid conversations in English. This is where we really put all these pieces together.
All right, let's dive into maintaining fluid conversations in English. One key strategy is using transition phrases to buy thinking time. For example, starting a sentence with well or you know can give you a moment to gather your thoughts.
That's a great point, Sarah. Another important aspect is showing active listening. Simple phrases like I see or that makes sense can go a long way in keeping the conversation flowing.
Absolutely, Mike. And don't be afraid to ask for clarification if you're not sure about something. Saying, "Could you explain that again?" or "I'm not sure I understand" shows you're engaged and want to keep the conversation going.
Speaking of which, reacting to what your conversation partner says is crucial. For instance, if someone shares good news, you might say, "That's great news." It shows you're paying attention and care about what they're saying.
Exactly. And when transitioning to new topics, phrases like "by the way" or "that reminds me" can help you smoothly change the subject without it feeling abrupt.
These strategies really help in maintaining a natural flow, don't they? It's like weaving a tapestry of conversation, with each thread connecting seamlessly to the next.
That's a lovely analogy, Mike. Now, let's put these techniques into practice. Imagine we're at a party and I've just met you. How would you break the ice?
Well, I might start with something like, "So have you been to one of Tom's parties before? I hear they're always a piece of cake to enjoy."
That's a great example. You've used an icebreaker and smoothly incorporated an idiom. How about we roleplay a bit more to show our listeners how these techniques work in action?
Sounds good to me. Let's say we're colleagues catching up after a long weekend. I'll start. "Hey Sarah, how was your weekend? I heard you went hiking."
Oh, it was wonderful, thanks for asking. You know, I was a bit nervous about the trail at first, but it turned out to be a piece of cake. How about you? Did you do anything exciting?
Well, I actually spent most of the weekend working on a project. It was tough, but I managed to kill two birds with one stone by finishing the report and preparing for next week's presentation.
That sounds productive. Speaking of work, have you heard about the new office policy? Apparently, we're moving to a more flexible schedule.
Really? That's news to me. Could you explain that a bit more? I'm not sure I understand how it's going to work.
Of course. Basically, we'll be able to choose our working hours as long as we're in the office for core hours. It's not my cup of tea, to be honest, as I prefer a fixed schedule.
I see. That's interesting. It might take some getting used to, but it could be the apple of many employees' eyes, especially those with families.
That's an excellent point, Mike. Now, let's shift gears a bit and look at a practical conversation example. We have a dialogue between two old friends, David and Emma, who are catching up after not seeing each other for a long time.
Great idea, Sarah. This conversation will showcase how idioms and conversation maintenance techniques work in real-life situations. Shall we dive in?
Absolutely. Let's start with David greeting Emma. He says, "Emma, it's so good to see you. It's been ages." This is a great way to break the ice and show enthusiasm.
Indeed. And Emma responds with equal excitement, saying, "David, what a surprise. I haven't seen you in donkey's years. How have you been?" Notice the use of the idiom donkey's years to emphasize the long time they haven't met.
Exactly. Then David replies, "I've been really busy with work. You know, burning the midnight oil almost every day." Here, he's using the idiom "burning the midnight oil" to express that he's been working late nights.
Emma shows interest by asking, "That sounds tough. What are you up to these days?" This is a great example of keeping the conversation flowing by asking follow-up questions.
David then shares, "Well, I've started my own business. It's still early days, but things are looking up." He's using a transition word "well" and the phrase "early days" to describe his new venture.
Emma responds supportively, saying, "That's fantastic. Starting your own business is no piece of cake. I'm really impressed." She's using the idiom "piece of cake" in a negative form to acknowledge the difficulty of David's endeavor.
David appreciates her support and adds, "Thanks. It's a lot of hard work, but I'm killing two birds with one stone, earning money and doing what I love." Here's another great use of an idiom we discussed earlier.
That's right, Sarah. David then asks about Emma's work, maintaining the back-and-forth nature of the conversation. Emma replies, "Actually, I've moved on. Corporate life wasn't really my cup of tea. I'm now freelancing as a graphic designer."
Another excellent use of an idiom. David compliments Emma, saying, "That's great. You were always the apple of your design teacher's eye at university. I remember how talented you were." This shows how idioms can be used to give compliments too.
Emma modestly responds, "You're too kind. Speaking of which, you remember Sarah from our English class." Here, she's using a transition phrase to change the subject smoothly.
This conversation is a great example of how idioms and conversation techniques can be naturally integrated into everyday dialogue. It flows smoothly, with both parties showing interest in each other's lives and using idioms appropriately.
Absolutely, Sarah. It's also worth noting how they maintain the conversation by asking questions, showing interest, and building on each other's responses. This is key to keeping a conversation going naturally.
Exactly, Mike. Now let's analyze this conversation and highlight the key elements that made it flow so smoothly.
Great idea. One thing that stood out to me was how naturally they incorporated idioms. For instance, burning the midnight oil and killing two birds with one stone were used effortlessly in context.
Absolutely. And did you notice how they maintained conversation? They used techniques like showing interest, asking follow-up questions, and expressing empathy.
Yes, that's crucial. For example, when David mentioned his busy work life, Emma responded with, "That sounds tough," showing empathy before asking for more details.
Excellent observation. Another technique they used was smooth topic transitions. Like when Emma said, "Speaking of which," to shift the conversation to their old classmate.
That's right. It's these small phrases that keep the conversation flowing naturally without abrupt changes. They also used expressions like "well" and "actually" to start their responses, giving them time to think.
Exactly. Now, for our listeners who want to practice, what would you suggest?
I'd recommend trying to incorporate at least 3 of the idioms we discussed into their conversations this week. Practice makes perfect after all.
Great advice. And don't forget to pay attention to the conversation maintenance techniques too. Active listening and showing interest are just as important as using idioms correctly.
Absolutely. It's all about balance. Use idioms to add color to your speech, but focus on maintaining a natural flow of conversation too.
Well said, Mike. As we wrap up, remember that mastering these skills takes time. Don't be discouraged if it feels awkward at first. Keep practicing.
That's right. In our next episode, we'll be exploring storytelling and sharing past experiences in English, focusing on different past tenses to bring your narratives to life.
Sounds exciting. Until then, keep practicing these idioms and conversation techniques. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
That's all for now. Remember, language learning is a journey, not a destination. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep. See you in our next episode.